Remote work, how the future of work will impact you now. This is what we're going to talk today in this video. And I have a very special guest, Chris Dyer, to share a bit of his remote work experience. Has been working for 12 years already in this area. He's also the founder of and CEO of People G2. He manages a lot of people, more than 30 people, full-time remote employees, and plus 3,000 independent contractors. So it's like a big team of people working remotely under his responsibility. He's also a speaker, a coach, an author. So I'm very happy to have you here, Chris, sharing your experience in this
Thanks
video.
so much
Thank you
for
very
having
much.
me. Thank you.
Yeah, nice. So do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you?
Sure. Like you said, I'm Chris Dyer. I'm a CEO by day, and I do a lot of speaking, and I'm an author of 2 books now. And, I really enjoy talking about culture, engagement, how, we make work better for people. And for me, a part of that equation, a part of what makes work kind of more tolerable or a fun thing or a rewarding thing is to allow flexibility in work. And that means remote work, right? That means hybrid. That means, we don't always have to be in the office with these sort of strict, handcuffs on us that we have to be sitting at a desk from a certain time. So remote work has been a strategy for me that we've used for years to get better talent, to get less expensive talent, to get those awesome people who maybe who can't do that traditional thing. And we've been able to get these like superhuman people in our organization that didn't fit into the little hole that, Google or Apple or somebody wanted them to fit into. Right. So it's been something that's just, I absolutely love. And so with pre-COVID, almost everything I was doing from a consulting and speaking standpoint was around culture. And I was always begging everyone to talk about remote work more. And they were like, yeah. Or, you come and do the big keynote for 5,000 people, Chris, talk about culture. And then tomorrow you can go down to Salon Z. You can go down to that little tiny room. We'll let you talk about remote work to anyone that wants, it really wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Of course, with COVID, that's all I'm talking about. That's
wow.
Now
that was a big change.
Just total switch, right?
Yeah.
And now I'm doing keynotes for 5,000 people on remote work. When before I was begging them, and now I'm sort of doing the opposite. Now I'm begging them to start thinking about culture again. And now that they're in remote, they can't forget how their culture is going to work. So it's funny how you just kind of ride the wave, whatever comes.
Yeah, and like 12 years working remotely, you have been through a lot of things. And it's interesting because I'm also have much more conversations with people about remote work, people that before were not considering that. But now, because it is a topic that everybody talks about, like people start thinking about it and how to bring that reality to their lives, they start working from home, better said, and they want to go fully remote from now on. So I think this is something that some people still don't understand, like the difference between working from home during the pandemic and working fully remotely. So which are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, every company and every person has to decide what's best for them. What does that mean? And the job, right? The work that's being done. Yeah. You have one extreme on one end. I mean, if you're making wine, you have to have people in the vineyard, right? You have to work there. I mean, there's no remote job in grape picking or grape making, right? I mean,
that's true.
It's pretty hard, right? Maybe customer service, maybe sales, they could be remote, but the people making the wine. So that's one extreme. And then you can kind of move across that spectrum. Now, I think if your work can be all the way remote, if you don't need to be in an office at all, then why have an office? Why be paying for that? Why have that, there if you don't need it? And then if it's something in between where maybe, you do need to come together sometimes because you're inventing something or there's some engineering or maybe there's, co-coding and maybe there are opportunities where you do need to be together, and that's fine. The organization needs to figure that out. But the more flexibility you allow, again, the better people, the better outcomes you can have.
Yes.
I noticed in a traditional office, some of the worst cultures are those that culture by what they can see, right? So they judge people on how many meetings they're in, how much they're walking around, how often they're at their desk, how much papers are rustling,
Yeah.
right? And what they can see. They also judge them on how well they dress and how attractive they might be. And these are not good, barometers of actual, performance.
Getting
of
work
actual-
done.
Or getting work done, right? Or productivity, or none of those things matter. And so if we remove that tendency, remove that habit of someone to say, well, that person looks busy and they dress nice and they're always here before I am. They're always arrive, that we can instead get better people. Now, what happens in those environments too is, let's say you have a single parent who is a fantastic employee, but they have 2 kids. And those kids get sick, and those kids need to be picked up from school and dropped off. And, they've got doctor's appointments and all this stuff. It's really hard for that person to exist in that very traditional office space without having to constantly leave and feel guilty and be shamed and people to be, talking about them as they're walking out the door again. But if you're working from home, you just take your kid to school, you come back, and you just don't count that as a part of your day. You just sort of add it on somewhere.
So it's not a problem anymore.
Not a problem.
You're still productive, still a good professional. Yeah.
Right. And so we remove all this this sort of innate, terrible human nature to be judging people, right? Because we don't see it anymore. Now, all we know is if you and I are working in a company together, I know you're supposed to get X, Y, and Z done. And if you get X, Y, and Z done and it's awesome.
By a certain date, and that's it.
By a certain date. What do I care? What do I care if you're at the golf course half the day? What do I care if, you sleep till 10 a.m. every day? I don't care. Yeah. So it's funny. I still have old employees. When I say old, I mean they've been with me for a long time. I don't mean their age. I just mean they've been with me for a long time. And they will still have a little bit of that old programming, how we used to be. And they will and
ask for permission. Say they need to leave earlier. Yeah.
Right. Like, oh, hey, just let you know I'm going to be, and I was, they'll start writing it and I write back to them, I don't care.
Stop that. I'm not interested.
Stop. And they've all pretty much unprogrammed, but they still sometimes.
And they have been working with you in a remote work environment for a while. So imagine people that suddenly they were forced to work from home. So there was a big change of mentality, or there should be, because some people are still thinking old style, and some companies are still like, you're working from home, but you need to be logged in. I'm going to call you several times per day. So I think there is a need of companies also changing their mentality and their culture to incorporate that.
I've also been telling a lot of people, the employees and those people looking for a new job, if that employer is going to manage you, if you're flexibly working by saying they're going to somehow monitor if you're on, and they're going to call you at certain times, and you have to be on these certain meetings all the time to prove that you're working and prove that you're there. Don't work there.
And those things exist, right?
They
Even
exist.
like taking photos of you to check if you're in front of the computer, measure how fast you're typing. Those things exist. So I think it's a choice. Yeah. Do I want to be in this kind of environment, or do I want another? I don't, definitely. Some people do.
And that is a symptom of a larger illness, right, inside the organization. Yeah. And so if people have to do that, and what that means is that, one, they don't know how to manage people. Number two, they don't have any clear idea on how to measure real performance and real output. Yeah. And so what does that mean to the average person? That means you are not going to ever get that promotion. You're never going to get the best work or the best projects because you're good or because you did a good job. The only way people will move up in those environments is through politics, through who you know, through brown nosing, through all of the things that you may not want to do. Yeah. If you just want to show up and do an awesome job, and in those environments, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, which is pretty much the way we used to measure performance in the office. So it doesn't make sense just bring it to the remote work environment. Yeah. Companies have to adjust because
they do, and it's hard. And if they were doing it bad before, remote work just makes it harder.
Exactly.
So good companies should say, here are the KPIs, here's the goals, here's the things we expect this person, this department, this role to do.
Yeah.
It will help you. We'll provide all the resources and training you need, but ultimately go do it your way, or go do it all jobs are a little differently. There are certain things that people have to do, maybe for safety or for, we know works best. There's best practices, but like inside of that, bubble, go do your thing. And if you do a good job and you meet our expectations, awesome. If you're below them, then let's figure out what's going on. And if you're exceeding them, well, maybe you're doing something we need to know about. Maybe you've figured out something new that we can share with everybody else, right? That's what the best organizations, that's how they view productivity.
Yeah.
A lot of them were surprised. It was all these studies that came out showing massively increases in productivity during the pandemic. And they were like, well, why is this? Well, there was a group of people that were just bored. They were working more, right? They had
nothing else to do.
Right.
Yes.
But so that was one group. And so the second group was that they didn't have to commute, right? So you eliminate 2 to 4 hours of commute. I mean, if you live where I live, I live in Orange County, California. And if I worked in LA, it's 2 hours each way. Wow. It's normally a 40-minute drive, but when you have rush hour, it's 2 hours each way.
So 4 hours per day that you're saving every single working day.
Yeah, and I know people that do it every day. They drive every day into LA to go to their job, right? Yeah. And so that's 4 hours.
Yeah.
So you just take one of those hours, just 30
and you
minutes.
Work, and you're already increasing your productivity. Yeah, right. Definitely. Yeah.
Right.
So, thanks. Yeah. Different approach from the job seeker perspective, Chris. Because more and more people are considering remote jobs now. Mm-hmm. I see them going through it, like trying to land a remote job and thinking about it, but there are some mistakes I see in the process. So from your perspective, from your experience, what would you say to job seekers like in this process, or which are the most common mistakes that you see the job seekers are doing?
Sure. So the good news is most of us have now worked remotely, which I would say before the pandemic, most people had not. And so one of the challenges right now is that you might say, well, I've worked remotely, but I don't know if I like it or not. And so one of the real, I guess, sort of things people need to think about is that when we get back to normal, right? If you have kids,
whatever that means,
but let's just say, let me define normal, right? Like,
go back to the office. You mean that?
Well, let's just say there's less restrictions on where we can go and move, and schools are open. Okay. Yeah. So if kids are going back to school and you are a person working from home, I think that's the best case scenario. You are home alone during the day with no one to bother you, and you have deep time to focus and get your work done. Mm-hmm. For me, that was the single best gift that remote work ever gave me. I didn't have people walking by my office all the time and just popping in to chat. I spent all day chatting with people, and I would have to stay after everyone left, and I would stay another 2 hours to get my work done.
To get the work done, yeah.
Because they were always wanting to talk and collaborate and ask permission, and it was all this stuff. And so when I went home, it was like I got all my work done before lunch, and I was like, what am I supposed to do now? It was like it just totally changed my world. So when you get that experience as a remote worker, you may, for a lot of people, they don't have that yet. They still have their kids at home. It's still a bit uncomfortable. There's a lot of chaos, and it's not ideal.
So people didn't really experience the proper remote work experience. They were working from home during the lockdown, during a pandemic. So it's very different than the real and all the possibilities that you have working remotely outside of a pandemic context.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, when they're going to go look for a job, if they've never been really remote, right, or only remote in this weird scenario, you need to be okay with that you do your job. The best remote employees, those that really enjoy it, right, they care about a few things. They care most about work-life balance, meaning they want the ability to turn it on, turn it off, and have that balance. But that's tricky. You can let everything else come in, and you can suddenly find that you're behind in your work. If you're allowing your personal life and things to overtake it, you can find that your job is overtaking your personal life, that you're working way too much. Yeah. So you have to create boundaries. So when we drive into an office or we take a train or a bus or however you get to work, right? When you get out of that vehicle, right, or whatever, and you walk in the door, that is a signpost to you. That's a signal. It's time to work.
Yeah.
Right?
Working mode on.
Work mode on, right.
Yeah.
And then when you leave, it's up, work mode off.
Yes.
Right? But when you work from home, what is that?
It's mixed. Yes. It's more difficult to set those boundaries.
So it takes a little bit of time to get used to those boundaries. So I always suggest people have a dedicated spot that is only for their job.
Yes.
Right? This office, this space. So when you're in that space, it's work.
Your brain understand that's working time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And not to also share that space with your spouse or your kids, or like, you do crafting in that same room. Like, you don't do anything else that's like a mix of things. If you have the space and you can do that, that's the best case scenario.
Have a proper space, separate space work, so you help your brain to process. Yeah.
I also suggest when you're done towards the end of the day, you actually shut your computer. And I know that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is another switch that I'm off, right?
Yeah.
And then if you find that you're keep going back to your emails and your Slack and these different programs, most phones have the ability to set certain apps and things to do not disturb. So you can use technology to your advantage to maybe shut some of those things off. Like, I can go into my Slack and say, I pause all notifications until
at 7 p.m. whatever. Yes.
Until tomorrow at 7 a.m. or whenever I'm willing. And so they're there and I can get them when I need them. But my phone isn't going off while I'm at dinner and I'm, all that. So you have to kind of find some ways to do that. But back to your original question. So you have to figure out your space, but you also need to make sure that you redesign your social interactions. And what I mean by that is if you are used to having work friends and, part of where you get your social outlet is at work in a traditional office, you're not going to get that so much at home, working from home. And that's okay. Just replace it somewhere else. Yes. Just make sure you get your social outlet by having a club or volunteering or having dinner parties or whatever. Like, you just have to...
But you need to be proactive to find people to socialize, because you won't have that by default in the office. And I remember when I was working in the office, sometimes I was getting along very well with my colleagues, but sometimes there was nothing common apart from work. So I was like, why am I spending 8 hours per day? Actually 9, because there was the lunch break also. Why am I spending so many hours of my day with people that I don't really like? I don't really connect with them. So when I started working fully remotely, it was like a freedom, because I could choose how I spend my time outside of work. But I had to be intentional about it. So I sign up for activities, I go to meetups, I call my friends and I arrange something. It won't happen naturally. You have to go and create those space. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a lot of like unprogramming for me. Like, I would feel guilty if I didn't work from 10 a.m. to 11. I mean, I just have these sometimes these moments where I got to do something else, or maybe I just don't feel productive. I just feel like I'm low in energy, and so I just will stop and I will go and do something else. I would fiddle on the guitar or meditate or just watch TV for an hour or whatever, right? And
are you feeling guilty?
I would feel guilty doing that. But then if I picked up my computer and did 2 hours of work at 8 o'clock at night, I didn't feel guilty about that.
Yeah.
Right? And I should, right? So it all balanced out in the end. All I had to do is get rid of the guilt on my end. I work when I feel productive, right? Sometimes I got to push through and get things done. There's deadlines, there's things like that. But in general, I work when I'm feeling really productive, and I try to ride that wave of I can get a lot of stuff done right now. My calendar's clear, right? And when I look back at my month or I look back at my week, I'm generally far more productive than most people I know.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And when you look at it, if you reflect on what you got done and what happened and all of that, there's always things you wish you got done, or you didn't, you could have done more or whatever. But you have to kind of unprogram some of that guilt, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. I remember in the office after having lunch, sometimes I was falling asleep. My energy level, Normally after lunch is a bit lower. And then I was having coffee. I was going to the restroom, washing my face, just trying to wake me up. But obviously I was more slow in my productivity. So working from home, sometimes if I feel asleep, I just take a 20 minutes nap and I wake up full of energy, and that's it. So I don't need to be drinking coffee or forcing myself in a moment that I'm normally low. But obviously I could not take a nap in the office. So there are so many things that we can get to know about ourselves, our body, and how we work better. And in the office, you have to be there. You have to do the work in a certain time, and that's it. So yeah, it's more flexibility, but more choices. And we need to be more intentional about how we use our time.
Right.
Yeah. Nice.
And it's a new way of working, so it's a new way of thinking, and you have to, and if you can go in with that, and it takes time. You're not gonna go from A to Z in one step, right? You got to go A to B and B to C and C to, you got to, it's a slow process. And I'm not even on Z. I've been doing it 12 years and I'm not, I'm still work in progress. So.
And Chris, you are about to launch your second book, right? Your second baby is coming on the way. So they want to share a bit more about that. That's super exciting, right? In the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's called Remote Work. You can find it on Amazon or wherever you buy your books online. It's everywhere. And I wrote it with my co-author, Kim Shepard, and she actually was my mentor to start with remote work. She has been, she just sold her company, but she had 300 or 400 recruiters around the world, and it was fully remote since 2001.
Wow.
And so, it was a totally different process. But so her and I started writing the book before the pandemic. We didn't even, again, I was wanting remote work to get more attention. And so we started writing the book, and then the pandemic happened and it was like, oh, wow. Okay. So
good timing.
It's our stories of running remote companies. It's also the stories of some really remarkable organizations and how they handled remote work, how they handled the pandemic, what were the lessons they learned. So if you like good stories, there's a lot of them. If you want really practical, tactical things that you can understand, that you can use, whether you're an employee, an employer, a leader in a group, it's from all different angles. How do you make meetings more effective? How do you make them like meetings that people actually want to come to, that they actually want to attend, right?
That's so important. So necessary.
Yeah. Who's been doing remote training? Who's been training people remotely the longest? Like, who's got the most experience? And the answer surprised us. And it was the U.S. Marine Corps. So it was actually, the armed forces. It was actually our military, on a division of our military. They've been training people remotely and successfully, like having to get people trained and up to speed without them being all together, without them being right in front of the thing, the missile or the airplane or whatever it is. It's really technical and complicated. Yeah, they've had to get people trained to eventually do a very important thing without being together. And so we got there. We had a general from the Marine Corps. We did a case study with him on how they do training and how they work with people that way, or spread all across the globe, right? Different time zones, different places, different, So there's so many lessons. So I think the book is this wonderful. I'm really, really proud of it. I'm sure every author says that.
Right?
But I think we did a really good job of mixing the stories and the practical knowledge. And it's a book that, again, you can, no matter where you are on the spectrum of remote work, it's going to make sense for you.
Wow. Interesting. Looking forward to read that. Yeah. It's going to be really exciting. Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sharing all of that. It's really a pleasure to talk with someone who has been working remotely for such a long time. And it's nice to show people also that remote work was already here before the pandemic. It is here now, and it's going to remain here. So we all need to make small adjustments to make it happen a better way, but it is something that is already established, and it's nice to learn from experts, from people who have been in the industry for longer. So thank you very much for your time, for all you shared.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.